November 2015. Part A. 1. What are the classes of threats? Spoofing of user identity, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, privacy breach or data leak, denial of service, DOS, elevation of privilege. 2. What is worm? Worms are also self-replicating in nature, but they don't hook themselves to the program on host computer. 3. What is the use of access control matrix? Access control matrix or access matrix is an abstract, formal security model of protection state in computer systems that characterizes the rights of each subject with respect to every object in the system. It was first introduced by Butler W. Lampson in 1971. 4. Give any two disadvantages of password. Brute force attacks and complexity. Storage and encryption. User engagement. 5. What is tracker attack? A tracker attack can fool the database manager into locating the desired data by using additional queries that produce small results. 6. State the purpose of integrity lock. The processing time efficiency of an integrity lock. 7. Write the categories of attack in network. Virus, eavesdropping, data modification, denial of service attack. 8. What are the two types of intrusion detection system? Signature-based intrusion detection system. Heuristic intrusion detection system. 9. What is risk leverage? Risk leverage is the difference in risk exposure divided by the cost of reducing the risk. 10. What is the difference between law and ethics? Law. Ethics. Described by formal, written documents. Described by unwritten principles. Interpreted by courts. Interpreted by each individual. Established by legislature representing all people. Presented by philosophers, religions, professional groups. Applicable to everyone. Personal choice. Priority determined by courts if two laws conflict. Priority determined by an individual if two principles conflict. Court final arbiter of right. No external arbiter. Part B. 11. Describe the important aspects that should be addressed when we talk about computer security. All information security measures try to address at least one of three goals: confidentiality, integrity, availability. These goals form the confidentiality, integrity, availability, KIA triad, the basis of all security programs. Information security professionals who create policies and procedures, often referred to as governance models, must consider each goal when creating a plan to protect a computer system. Integrity models. Integrity models keep data pure and trustworthy by protecting system data from intentional or accidental changes. Integrity models have three goals: prevent unauthorized users from making modifications to data or programs. Prevent authorized users from making improper or unauthorized modifications. Maintain internal and external consistency of data and programs. An example of integrity checks is balancing a batch of transactions to make sure that all the information is present and accurately accounted for. Availability models. Availability models keep data and resources available for authorized use, especially during emergencies or disasters. Information security professionals usually address three common challenges to availability: denial of service, DOS, due to intentional attacks or because of undiscovered flaws in implementation, for example, a program written by a programmer who is unaware of a flaw that could crash the program if a certain unexpected input is encountered. Loss of information system capabilities because of natural disasters, fires, floods, storms, or earthquakes, or human actions, bombs or strikes. Equipment failures during normal use. Some activities that preserve confidentiality, integrity, and/or availability are granting access only to authorized personnel, applying encryption to information that will be sent over the internet or stored on digital media, periodically testing computer system security to uncover new vulnerabilities, building software defensively, and developing a disaster recovery plan to ensure that the business can continue to exist in the event of a disaster or loss of access by personnel. 12. What are the problems associated with biometrics? Biometric security is a security mechanism used to authenticate and provide access to a facility or system based on the automatic and instant verification of an individual's physical characteristics. Because biometric security evaluates an individual's bodily elements or biological data, it is the strongest and most foolproof physical security technique used for identity verification. 4 reasons why biometric security is the way forward. The IoT landscape is becoming more complex. Passwords are not enough. Biometric security is more efficient. More companies and institutions are embracing biometrics. Biometric security is mainly implemented in environments with critical physical security requirements or that are highly prone to identity theft. Biometric security-based systems or engines store human body characteristics that do not change over an individual's lifetime. These include fingerprints, high texture, voice, hand patterns, and facial recognition. An individual's body characteristics are pre-stored in a biometric security system or scanner, which may be accessed by authorized personnel. When an individual walks into a facility or tries to gain access to a system, the biometric scanner evaluates her physical characteristics, which are matched with stored records. If a match is located, the individual is granted access. 13. What is indirect attack? Explain with examples. An indirect attack is an attack launched by a third-party computer. By using someone else's computer to launch an attack, it becomes far more difficult to track down the actual attacker. There have also been cases where attackers took advantage of public anonymizing systems, such as the Tor Onion router system. An attack by some tries to infer a value from a reported sum. Count. The count can be combined with the sum to produce some even more revealing results. Mean. The arithmetic mean average allows exact disclosure if the attacker can manipulate the subject population. Median. 14. What makes a network vulnerable? Anonymity. An anonymity network enables users to access the web while blocking any tracking or tracing of their identity on the internet. This type of online anonymity moves internet traffic through a worldwide network of volunteer servers. Anonymity networks prevent traffic analysis and network surveillance, or at least make it more difficult. One open source anonymity software free to public use is known as Tor. Tor software conceals the user's location and/or usage. Another anonymity network is Freenet, which enables users to anonymously publish free sites as well as share files and chat on forums. Still another anonymity network is I2P. I2P identity-sensitive networks are at once distributed and dynamic in nature, and they route traffic through other peers. Many points of attack. An attack is an information security threat that involves an attempt to obtain, alter, destroy, remove, implant, or reveal information without authorized access or permission. It happens to both individuals and organizations. There are many different kinds of attacks, including but not limited to passive, active, targeted, clickjacking, brandjacking, botnet, phishing, spamming, inside and outside. Attack is one of the biggest security threats in information technology, and it comes in different forms. A passive attack is one that does not affect any system, although information is obtained. A good example of this is wiretapping. An active attack has the potential to cause major damage to an individual's or organization's resource because it attempts to alter system resources or affect how they work. A good example of this might be a virus or other type of malware. Sharing. An information sharing and analysis organization, or ISAO, is a group that, on a voluntary basis, gathers, analyzes, and shares cyber threat information among its member organizations. Information sharing and analysis centers are types of ISAOs. ISAOs are often formed around a specific industry or sector, e.g., legal services, medical devices. In such ISAOs, shared information is often about specific threats to an industry or sector and can include data pertaining to information systems and applications frequently used by ISAO members. There are also ISAOs that focus on a specific geographic region, such as a city or state. Complexity of system. Complexity as a field of study isn't new. Its roots could be traced back to the work on metaphysics by Aristotle. Complexity theory is largely inspired by biological systems and has been used in social science, epidemiology, and natural science study for some time now. It has been used in the study of economic systems and free markets alike and gaining acceptance for financial risk analysis as well. It is not something that has been very popular in the cybersecurity so far, but there is growing acceptance of complexity thinking in applied sciences and computing. 15. Write about IPsec. Internet Protocol Security, IPsec, is a framework of open standards for protecting communications over Internet Protocol, IP, networks through the use of cryptographic security services. IPsec supports network-level peer authentication, data origin authentication, data integrity, data confidentiality, encryption, and replay protection. Applications of IPsec. Secure branch office connectivity over the Internet. A company can build a secure virtual private network over the Internet or over a public WAN. This enables a business to rely heavily on the Internet and reduce its need for private networks, saving costs and network management overhead. Secure remote access over the Internet. An end user whose system is equipped with IP security protocols can make a local call to an Internet Service Provider (ISP) and gain secure access to a company network. This reduces the cost of toll charges for traveling employees and telecommuters. Establishing extranet and intranet connectivity with partners. IPsec can be used to secure communication with other organizations, ensuring authentication and confidentiality and providing a key exchange mechanism. Enhancing electronic commerce security. Even though some web and electronic commerce applications have built-in security protocols, the use of IPsec enhances that security. Benefits of IPsec. The benefits of IPsec are listed below. IPsec in a firewall router provides strong security to all traffic crossing the perimeter. IPsec in a firewall is resistant to bypass. IPsec is below transport layer, TCP, UDP, hence transparent to applications. IPsec can be transparent to end users. IPsec can provide security for individual users if needed, useful for off-site workers and setting up a secure virtual subnetwork for sensitive applications. 16. List out the arguments that are against for usage for risk analysis. Arguments for and against risk analysis. Risk analysis is a well-known planning tool, used often by auditors, accountants, and managers. In many situations, such as obtaining approval for new drugs, new power plants, and new medical devices, a risk analysis is required by law in many countries. There are many good reasons to perform a risk analysis in preparation for creating a security plan. Improve awareness. Discussing issues of security can raise the general level of interest and concern among developers and users. Especially when the user population has little expertise in computing, the risk analysis can educate users about the role security plays in protecting functions and data that are essential to user operations and products. Relate security mission to management objectives. Security is often perceived as a financial drain for no gain. Management does not always see that security helps balance harm and control costs. Identify assets, vulnerabilities, and controls. Some organizations are unaware of their computing assets, their value to the organization, and the vulnerabilities associated with those assets. A systematic analysis produces a comprehensive list of assets, valuations, and risks. Improve basis for decisions. A security manager can present an argument such as, "I think we need a firewall here," or "I think we should use token-based authentication instead of passwords." Risk analysis augments the manager's judgment as a basis for the decision. Justify expenditures for security. Some security mechanisms appear to be very expensive and without obvious benefit. A risk analysis can help identify instances where it is worth the expense to implement a major security mechanism. Justification is often derived from examining the much larger risks of not spending for security. 17. Describe the principles of fair information practice. The fair information practices is based on 5 principles. There must be no personal data record-keeping systems whose very existence is secret. There must be a way for a person to find out what information about the person is in a record and how it is used. There must be a way for a person to prevent information about the person that was obtained for one purpose from being used or made available for other purposes without the person's consent. There must be a way for a person to correct or amend a record of identifiable information about the person. Any organization creating, maintaining, using, or disseminating records of identifiable personal data must assure the reliability of the data for their intended use and must take precautions to prevent misuses of the data. Part C. 18. What are the sources of virus and explain how can you prevent it? The source of viruses. Since a virus can be rather small, its code can be hidden inside other larger and more complicated programs. 200 lines of a virus could be separated into 100 packets of 2 lines of code and a jump each. These 100 packets could be easily hidden inside a compiler, a database manager, a file manager, or some other large utility. Virus discovery could be aided by a procedure to determine if two programs are equivalent. However, theoretical results in computing are very discouraging when it comes to the complexity of the equivalence problem. The general question, are these two programs equivalent, is undesirable, although that question can be answered for many specific pairs of programs. Even ignoring the general undesirability problem, two modules may produce subtly different results that may or may not be security relevant. One may run faster, or the first may use a temporary file for workspace whereas the second performs all its computations in memory. These differences could be benign, or they could be a marker of an infection. Therefore, we are unlikely to develop a screening program that can separate infected modules from uninfected ones. Although the general is dismaying, the particular is not. If we know that a particular virus may infect a computing system, we can check for it and detect it if it is there. Having found the virus, however, we are left with the task of cleansing the system of it. Removing the virus in a running system requires being able to detect and eliminate its instances faster than it can spread. Prevention of virus infection. The only way to prevent the infection of a virus is not to share executable code with an infected source. This philosophy used to be easy to follow because it was easy to tell if a file was executable or not. For example, on PCs, a .x extension was a clear sign that the file was executable. However, as we have noted, today's files are more complex, and a seemingly non-executable file may have some executable code buried deep within it. For example, a word processor may have commands within the document file, as we noted earlier. These commands, called macros, make it easy for the user to do complex or repetitive things. But they are really executable code embedded in the context of the document. Similarly, spreadsheets, presentation slides, and other office or business-related files can contain code or scripts that can be executed in various ways and thereby harbor viruses. And, as we have seen, the applications that run or use these files may try to be helpful by automatically invoking the executable code, whether you want it run or not. Against the principles of good security, email handlers can be set to automatically open, without performing access control, attachments or embedded code for the recipient, so your email message can have animated bears dancing across the top. Another approach virus writers have used is a little-known feature in the Microsoft file design. Although a file with a .doc extension is expected to be a Word document, in fact, the true document type is hidden in a field at the start of the file. This convenience ostensibly helps a user who inadvertently names a Word document with a .ppt, PowerPoint, or any other extension. In some cases, the operating system will try to open the associated application, but if that fails, the system will switch to the application of the hidden file type. So, the virus writer creates an executable file, names it with an inappropriate extension, and sends it to the victim, describing it as a picture or a necessary code add-in or something else desirable. The unwitting recipient opens the file and, without intending to, executes the malicious code. More recently, executable code has been hidden in files containing large datasets, such as pictures or read-only documents. These bits of viral code are not easily detected by virus scanners and certainly not by the human eye. For example, a file containing a photograph may be highly granular. If every 16th bit is part of a command string that can be executed, then the virus is very difficult to detect. Since you cannot always know which sources are infected, you should assume that any outside source is infected. Fortunately, you know when you are receiving code from an outside source. Unfortunately, it is not feasible to cut off all contact with the outside world. In their interesting paper comparing computer virus transmission with human disease transmission, Kefat et al. Observed that individuals' efforts to keep their computers free from viruses lead to communities that are generally free from viruses because members of the community have little electronic contact with the outside world. In this case, transmission is contained not because of limited contact but because of limited contact outside the community. Governments, for military or diplomatic secrets, often run disconnected network communities. The trick seems to be in choosing one's community prudently. However, as use of the internet and the World Wide Web increases, such separation is almost impossible to maintain. Nevertheless, there are several techniques for building a reasonably safe community for electronic contact, including the following. Use only commercial software acquired from reliable, well-established vendors. There is always a chance that you might receive a virus from a large manufacturer with a name everyone would recognize. However, such enterprises have significant reputations that could be seriously damaged by even one bad incident. So they go to some degree of trouble to keep their products virus-free and to patch any problem-causing code right away. Similarly, software distribution companies will be careful about products they handle. Test all new software on an isolated computer. If you must use software from a questionable source, test the software first on a computer with no hard disk, not connected to a network, and with the boot disk removed. Run the software and look for unexpected behavior, even simple behavior such as unexplained figures on the screen. Test the computer with a copy of an up-to-date virus scanner, created before running the suspect program. Only if the program passes these tests should it be installed on a less isolated machine. Open attachments only when you know them to be safe. What constitutes safe is up to you, as you have probably already learned in this chapter. Certainly, an attachment from an unknown source is of questionable safety. You might also distrust an attachment from a known source but with a peculiar message. Make a recoverable system image and store it safely. If your system does become infected, this clean version will let you reboot securely because it overwrites the corrupted system files with clean copies. For this reason, you must keep the image write protected during reboot. Prepare this image now. Before infection, after infection it is too late. For safety, prepare an extra copy of the safe boot image. Make and retain backup copies of executable system files. This way, in the event of a virus infection, you can remove infected files and reinstall from the clean backup copies, stored in a secure offline location, of course. Use virus detectors, often called virus scanners, regularly and update them daily. Many of the virus detectors available can both detect and eliminate infection from viruses. Several scanners are better than one, because one may detect the viruses that others miss. Because scanners search for virus signatures, they are constantly being revised as new viruses are discovered. New virus signature files, or new versions of scanners, are distributed frequently. Often, you can request automatic downloads from the vendor's website. Keep your detector's signature file up to date. 19. Explain the file protection mechanism in detail. Until now, we have examined approaches to protecting a general object, no matter the object's nature or type. But some protection schemes are particular to the type. To see how they work, we focus in this section on file protection. The examples we present are only representative, they do not cover all possible means of file protection on the market. Basic forms of protection. We noted earlier that all multi-user operating systems must provide some minimal protection to keep one user from maliciously or inadvertently accessing or modifying the files of another. As the number of users has grown, so also has the complexity of these protection schemes. All, none protection. In the original IBM OS operating systems, files were by default public. Any user could read, modify, or delete a file belonging to any other user. Instead of software or hardware-based protection, the principal protection involved trust combined with ignorance. System designers supposed that users could be trusted not to read or modify others' files, because the users would expect the same respect from others. Ignorance helped this situation, because a user could access a file only by name. Presumably, users knew the names only of those files to which they had legitimate access. However, it was acknowledged that certain system files were sensitive and that the system administrator could protect them with a password. A normal user could exercise this feature, but passwords were viewed as most valuable for protecting operating system files. Two philosophies guided password use. Sometimes, passwords were used to control all accesses, read, write, or delete, giving the system administrator complete control over all files. But at other times, passwords would control only write and delete accesses, because only these two actions affected other users. In either case, the password mechanism required a system operator's intervention each time access to the file began. However, this all or none protection is unacceptable for several reasons. Lack of trust. The assumption of trustworthy users is not necessarily justified. For systems with few users who all know each other, mutual respect might suffice, but in large systems where not every user knows every other user, there is no basis for trust. All or nothing. Even if a user identifies a set of trustworthy users, there is no convenient way to allow access only to them. Rise of time sharing. This protection scheme is more appropriate for a batch environment in which users have little chance to interact with other users and in which users do their thinking and exploring when not interacting with the system. However, on time-sharing systems, users interact with other users. Because users choose when to execute programs, they are more likely in a time-sharing environment to arrange computing tasks to be able to pass results from one program or one user to another. Complexity. Because human operator intervention is required for this file protection, operating system performance is degraded. For this reason, this type of file protection is discouraged by computing centers for all but the most sensitive data sets. File listings. For accounting purposes and to help users remember for what files they are responsible, various system utilities can produce a list of all files. Thus, users are not necessarily ignorant of what files reside on the system. Interactive users may try to browse through any unprotected files. 20. List out the factors that make data sensitive. Also describe the different type of disclosures. Factors of data sensitive. Inherently sensitive. The value itself may be so revealing that it is sensitive. Examples are allocations of defensive missiles from a sensitive source. The source of the data may indicate a need for confidentiality. An example is information from an informer whose identity would be compromised if the information were disclosed. Declared sensitive. The database administrator or the owner of the data may have declared the data to be sensitive. Part of a sensitive attribute or a sensitive record. In a database, an entire attribute or record may be classified as sensitive. Sensitive in relation to previously disclosed information. Some data become sensitive in the presence of other data. For example, the longitude coordinate of a secret gold mine reveals little, but the longitude coordinate in conjunction with the latitude coordinate pinpoints the mine. Access decisions. The DBMS may consider several factors when deciding whether to permit an access. Availability of the data. Acceptability of the access. Authenticity of the user. Availability of data. One or more required elements may be inaccessible. For example, if a user is updating several fields, other users' accesses to those fields must be blocked temporarily. This blocking ensures that users do not receive inaccurate information. Acceptability of access. One or more values of the record may be sensitive and not accessible by the general user. A DBMS should not release sensitive data to unauthorized individuals. Assurance of authenticity. Certain characteristics of the user external to the database may also be considered when permitting access. For example, to enhance security, the database administrator may permit someone to access the database only at certain times, such as during working hours. Types of disclosures. Exact data. The most serious disclosure is the exact value of a sensitive data item itself. Bounds. Another exposure is disclosing bounds on a sensitive value, that is, indicating that a sensitive value, y, is between two values, L and H. Negative result. Sometimes we can word a query to determine a negative result. That is, we can learn that z is not the value of y. Existence. The existence of data is itself a sensitive piece of data. Probable value. It may be possible to determine the probability that a certain element has a certain value. 21. Describe the message confidentiality and integrity threats. Message confidentiality threats. An attacker can easily violate message confidentiality and perhaps integrity because of the public nature of networks. Eavesdropping and impersonation attacks can lead to a confidentiality or integrity failure. Here we consider several other vulnerabilities that can affect confidentiality. Misdelivery. Sometimes messages are misdelivered because of some flaw in the network hardware or software. Most frequently, messages are lost entirely, which is an integrity or availability issue. Occasionally, however, a destination address is modified or some handler malfunctions, causing a message to be delivered to someone other than the intended recipient. All of these random events are quite uncommon. Exposure. To protect the confidentiality of a message, we must track it all the way from its creation to its disposal. Along the way, the content of a message may be exposed in temporary buffers at switches, routers, gateways, and intermediate hosts throughout the network and in the workspaces of processes that build, format, and present the message. In earlier chapters, we considered confidentiality exposures in programs and operating systems. All of these exposures apply to networked environments as well. Furthermore, a malicious attacker can use any of these exposures as part of a general or focused attack on message confidentiality. Traffic flow analysis. Sometimes not only is the message itself sensitive, but the fact that a message exists is also sensitive. For example, if the enemy during wartime sees a large amount of network traffic between headquarters and a particular unit, the enemy may be able to infer that significant action is being planned involving that unit. In a commercial setting, messages sent from the president of one company to the president of a competitor could lead to speculation about a takeover or conspiracy to fix prices. Or communications from the prime minister of one country to another with whom diplomatic relations were suspended could lead to inferences about a rapprochement between the countries. In these cases, we need to protect both the content of messages and the header information that identifies sender and receiver. Message integrity threats. In many cases, the integrity or correctness of a communication is at least as important as its confidentiality. In fact, for some situations, such as passing authentication data, the integrity of the communication is paramount. Threats based upon failures of integrity in communication. Falsification of messages. Increasingly, people depend on electronic messages to justify and direct actions. For example, if you receive a message from a good friend asking you to meet at the pub for a drink next Tuesday evening, you will probably be there at the appointed time. Likewise, you will comply with a message from your supervisor telling you to stop work on Project A and devote your energy instead to Project B. As long as it is reasonable, we tend to act on an electronic message just as we would on a signed letter, a telephone call, or a face-to-face communication. Noise. Signals sent over communications media are subject to interference from other traffic on the same media as well as from natural sources, such as lightning, electric motors, and animals. Such unintentional interference is called noise. These forms of noise are inevitable and they can threaten the integrity of data in a message. 22. What are the basic steps of risk analysis and explain them? Steps of a risk analysis. Risk analysis is performed in many different contexts. For example, environmental and health risks are analyzed for activities such as building dams, disposing of nuclear waste, or changing a manufacturing process. Risk analysis for security is adapted from more general management practices, placing special emphasis on the kinds of problems likely to arise from security issues. By following well-defined steps, we can analyze the security risks in a computing system. The basic steps of risk analysis are listed below. 1. Identify assets. 2. Determine vulnerabilities. 3. Estimate likelihood of exploitation. 4. Compute expected annual loss. 5. Survey applicable controls and their costs. 6. Project annual savings of control. 23. Explain the different types of non-malicious program error. Being human, programmers and other developers make many mistakes, most of which are unintentional and non-malicious. Many such errors cause program malfunctions but do not lead to more serious security vulnerabilities. However, a few classes of errors have plagued programmers and security professionals for decades, and there is no reason to believe they will disappear. In this section, we consider 3 classic error types that have enabled many recent security breaches. We explain each type, why it is relevant to security, and how it can be prevented or mitigated. Buffer overflows. A buffer overflow is the computing equivalent of trying to pour 2 liters of water into a 1-liter pitcher. Some water is going to spill out and make a mess. And in computing, what a mess these errors have made. Definition. A buffer or array or string is a space in which data can be held. A buffer resides in memory. Because memory is finite, a buffer's capacity is finite. For this reason, in many programming languages, the programmer must declare the buffer's maximum size so that the compiler can set aside that amount of space. Let us look at an example to see how buffer overflows can happen. Suppose a C language program contains the declaration char sample 10. The compiler sets aside 10 bytes to store this buffer, 1 byte for each of the 10 elements of the array, sample 0 through sample 9. Now we execute this statement. Sample 10 equals A. His subscript is out of bounds, that is, it does not fall between 0 and 9. So we have a problem. The nicest outcome, from a security perspective, is for the compiler to detect the problem and mark the error during compilation. However, if the statement were sample I equals A, we could not identify the problem until I was set during execution to a too big subscript. It would be useful if, during execution, the system produced an error message warning of a subscript out of bounds. Unfortunately, in some languages, buffer sizes do not have to be predefined, so there is no way to detect an out-of-bounds error. More importantly, the code needed to check each subscript against its potential maximum value takes time and space during execution, and the resources are applied to catch a problem that occurs relatively infrequently. Even if the compiler were careful in analyzing the buffer declaration and use, this same problem can be caused with pointers, for which there is no reasonable way to define a proper limit. Thus, some compilers do not generate the code to check for exceeding bounds. Let us examine this problem more closely. It is important to recognize that the potential overflow causes a serious problem only in some instances. The problem's occurrence depends on what is adjacent to the array sample. For example, suppose each of the 10 elements of the array sample is filled with the letter A and the erroneous reference uses the letter B as follows. For I equals 0, I less than equals 9, I plus plus, sample I equals A, sample 10 equals B. All program and data elements are in memory during execution, sharing space with the operating system, other code, and resident routines. So there are 4 cases to consider in deciding where T, goes. If the extra character overflows into the user's data space, it simply overrides an existing variable value, or it may be written into an as yet unused location, perhaps affecting the program's result, but affecting no other program or data.